I couldn't make this up if I tried. The first week of April, my housemate became sick, very sick, with I knew was COVID-19. So those first 2 weeks of April were pretty scary. And so for 2 weeks, I basically just waited for the axe to drop, and it never did. And so I kind of just assumed at that point I'd gotten lucky and dodged the bullet and did not somehow get the virus.
What John didn't know is that he'd already been infected with COVID and beat it.
It wasn't until later, in July, that I found out that not only had I contracted the virus in late March, but that I had the super antibodies in my blood that made me permanently immune.
John's antibodies were only discovered after he happened to mention his brush with COVID to Dr. Lance Leota.
We collected his blood at different points in time, and now it's a gold mine to study different ways of attacking the virus. And the way those antibodies work, in the case of the COVID, is the COVID has these spikes on the surface, and those spikes are used to attach to the cell and then invade the cell. The patient's antibodies stick to those spike tips. And so when antibodies on it, it can't bind to the surface of the cell and infect it.
But John's body is different. His antibodies attack multiple parts of the virus and eliminate it quickly.
Some of our patients had really high levels of antibodies against COVID. You could dilute their antibodies 1 to 10,000. 1 to 20,000, that's a big dilution, and it would still kill 90% of the virus.
Not only that, but his antibodies are so good at killing COVID that he's even immune to the new variants. Scientists hope that super antibodies can teach them how to make better vaccines and treatments for COVID.
Look, I know I'm not the only person who's got antibodies like these. I'm just one of the few people who have been found.
But this discovery could have been missed because African Americans are far less likely to participate in scientific studies than their white counterparts.
There's been a long history of, I would say, exploitation, I think is the sort of single best word, that has sown a lot of mistrust in the African American community, and I would say an understandable mistrust.
Perhaps the most well-known experiment on African Americans is the Tuskegee syphilis study. For more than 40 years, scientists sponsored by the U.S. government studied black men in Alabama who had syphilis without providing treatment.
Maybe most notably, over the course of the years that the study was undertaken, antibiotics were discovered and became widely available. So they were lied to in terms of their recruitment, they were lied to in terms of what was being done to them during the course of the study, and then they were denied care in the name of the research over as many years as the study continued. Out of the disclosure of the study at Tuskegee came the regulations and oversight that we now have for all of human subject research that have been in place since the 1970s and continue to this day.
That history can help to explain why those hit hardest by the virus are sometimes reluctant to participate in studies or get the vaccine.
We want to make sure that the communities that are hardest hit are at the table to receive the benefits of the things that are developed. And to do that means that those communities have to be part of the research population as well.
I just think we owe it to those people, those victims of the Tuskegee study and others, to honor them by being involved in the process, to make sure it doesn't happen again, and also to save lives, particularly among an African American community that's being most adversely affected by this virus. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the people we know and love to protect each other.